Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends. Today we are going to talk about calming emotional reactivity, which is such an important topic for us highly sensitive people, especially in relationships. I really want to get practical with you today about what to do when you are having strong emotions, when you're having some emotional upheaval. Maybe it's something that's going on between you and your partner, something that you got triggered by, and you really feel yourself start to react out of that strong emotion. Okay, so I'm going to give you some practical things, some steps to take that are so key for being able to deal with whatever the issue was that triggered the emotion really effectively in the end. But first, I want to talk just a little bit about what I mean by emotional reactivity and how it affects us and how it shows up. So, you may already understand that a lot of people use the word sensitive, and sensitivity has kind of gotten a bad name because people use that word, or they think of sensitive to mean touchy or easily upset, right? Or emotionally reactive. That's one definition of being sensitive. Certainly not actually what the trait of high sensitivity actually is all about. It's just a tiny little piece. But I want to just explain that a little bit, because it's not necessarily a terrible thing to be sensitive, right? It can be an amazing thing, like I've talked about a lot. But we do have strong emotions, and there's a good reason for that. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be an incredible thing. So I want you to be able to experience your sensitivity and the deep feelings that you do have in a healthy way, in a way that doesn't cause more problems in your marriage or relationship. All right. So let's talk about that a little bit. As highly sensitive people, we take in information deeply, right? Which means we often, or we just do, internalize our perceptions, whatever we perceive is happening out there, deeply, right? We perceive those through what I call our personal filter, which is really our own brain and nervous system, that are like really based on your personal history and your cultural and genetic inheritances. Your own brain and your nervous system are really pre-primed or pre-patterned to interpret certain things out there in certain ways. So things your husband says, actions that he takes, you're going to interpret that in a certain way. We all interpret them differently. Right? Like your husband might say one thing and I would interpret it totally differently than you, based on how my own brain and nervous system are wired or pre-patterned, right? Based on our experiences in life, basically, right? So we internalize what he says or what he does or all the things out there in the world. We internalize that deeply through our own personal system, body, mind, heart system, right? And then we feel the feelings that come from that way we're internalizing it deeply. We feel those feelings deeply. And this can be both good feelings, right? If we perceive something that he does or something out there in the world as being a good thing, we'll experience really good feelings. And if we perceive that thing out there as being bad, we're gonna feel strong negative feelings, most likely, right? So when we internalize something negatively, we're gonna feel that negativity in one form of emotion or another really strongly. Right? And if we don't know how to handle those strong feelings peacefully or gracefully, we are, as human beings in general, not just as highly sensitive people, we're going to be likely to react out of them. We're going to react strongly. Okay. So to get more specific about this, what this can really look like is shutting down, right? Kind of going into your turtle shell, turtling, I call that sometimes, right? Or withdrawing, right? It might mean running out of the room where you and your husband were having a conversation that you got triggered from, right? Or it can look like you lashing out, right? Snapping at him, criticizing, using sort of saying things in a snarky way or a sarcastic way or a mean kind of condescending tone, right? Or yelling or crying, right? Or ranting or going on and trying to figure things out, right? Not letting the conversation pause, but just like going on and feeling really stuck and unable to stop talking or stop trying to work through things in the moment, right? This can also look like reacting out of your strong emotions can look like swearing and name calling, or really just any other big display of anger or despair or, you know what I mean, all those emotions, right? So if this happens for you, please hear this. This is so important. You are normal. You are not bad. Nothing is wrong with you. You are not broken. Okay? You are just a sensitive human being with a sensitive human brain and big feelings. And it's likely that you never learned how to feel your feelings. That's something we're not taught, how to actually feel your feelings. So instead, as is completely natural, you erupt out of them, right? Really just as a way to shed those feelings, as a way to try to get rid of those feelings, right? Like we need to it's such strong energy, these big emotions, that our natural instinct when we haven't learned otherwise is to just act out of them so we no longer have to experience them. But as might be really obvious to you, this often causes more trouble than good, especially in our relationships. So good news, you can totally learn how to not let this be a feature of your relationship, not let this emotional reactivity be common. You can learn how to handle those feelings really gracefully and actually even eliminate a lot of the unnecessary ones. And I bet you probably want to because I've totally been there. I absolutely know how bad it feels to be in that sort of storm of emotions, right? Not only during the kind of episode of feeling those emotions, that episode of that big storm, but the aftermath of it, right? The emotional fallout can feel really bad. It can feel awful. So I don't know about you, but when I've gone through such big emotional storms and reacted out of them, I later will feel guilty or embarrassed or ashamed, and also just this weird slimy sense of having been kind of manipulative in that interaction with my partner. For me, it really used to look like I would oftentimes erupt into tears and then storm off and cry, thinking that that would draw my husband to me and then we could fix things. Right? That was a form of my emotional reactivity that I didn't know how to handle, that I didn't know how to calm in myself. And then I just feel yucky about that later because it just didn't feel like in integrity. It didn't feel like who I wanted to be in my relationship, right? And the other thing that can happen is the emotional fallout or aftermath can really be, this is super common, just this sense of lingering disconnection or tension for days, for hours, for days, for months with your man, with your partner. And all of this can actually lead to perhaps having bigger issues in general in your marriage, not being able to, or having fear of having constructive conversations, addressing difficult topics, right? Or like your partner steering clear of bringing things up that might affect you negatively, and like feeling like he has to walk on eggshells so as to avoid fights and blowups, right? Because he is, being a human being too, he's likely negative emotion averse, like I talked about a couple episodes ago, which is like just totally normal in our society. Right. So it might lead to really not being open and authentic and genuine with each other, not ultimately understanding each other, not solving problems, having lots of fights, reacting to each other's reactions, all of these things that, can make your marriage start to feel more like a war zone than a loving, nourishing, supportive zone that you want it to be. Right? So the question becomes, how do we avoid having all this emotional reactivity, right? So we have been, over the course of this podcast, talking about lots of the mental, emotional, sort of internal work you can do to nip a lot of this in the bud, to prevent it from happening at all. And I also will go more thoroughly into the future on that and what's going on actually in your body, mind, heart system, and really how to work with your nervous system and all the pre-programming in you that's underlying like why you are having that emotional reactivity, why that happens to you, so that you can really understand and work with it lovingly and effectively, okay, in the future. But today, so I'm going to go into that in the future, But today we're going to focus more on the steps you can take to stop the extra emotional reactive moments from causing more hurt and disconnection and pain in your marriage, right? So we're going to look at what you can do, what practical, tangible actions you can take when those strong emotions start to flare up and you're tempted to react out of them. And we'll look at some little adjustments you can make just in your schedule, in your daily life, when you aren't in that moment of reactivity, to prevent those emotional reactive moments from happening. All right? Okay. So I'm going to go into a few kind of ground rules that I want you to really take to heart about what to do when you're feeling strong emotions. So the first one sounds so simple, but it's not so easy. It's don't talk when really mad or really upset or emotionally charged. Okay? And this can feel I'm like, okay, right? Easy peasy. No, this can feel really hard, right? Because most likely when you're feeling emotionally reactive, especially if you have the tendency to go into the fight part of the nervous system, if that's your reaction to fight, you can be super compelled to try to figure it out now, right? We all have that. So many of us have that tendency to think we need to get the feelings to go away right now, resolve the issue now, get your partner to help you feel better in the moment, to solve it all at once, right? And of course, it can be hard to not talk when you're this upset because your thoughts are racing a million miles an hour, right? And really just the natural human tendency is to want to respond and resolve things when your emotions are really charged like this. But it's the worst time to do it, right? Because it rarely works because you are flooded, right? Your emotions are so strong. Your system is just like out of whack. You've lost access to that wise, rational, intelligent, like higher part of your brain, right? You've lost access to the capacity to actually constructively communicate and solve things. Simple as that, right? And if you've done that, and like, especially if you've started to you've had charged emotions and you've started to kind of get into like a fight or something, it's not going to just be you, quite likely, that's flooded or emotionally overwhelmed. It's also going to be him, possibly, right? And if he's in a similar space, things will, I guarantee, escalate from there, not resolve like you want them to. And I'm sure that you who have had this experience, you totally know what I'm talking about, right? Usually you just can't solve something from those heightened charged emotional states, right? So the other ground rule or giant suggestion is make a commitment to yourself that you will not try to solve anything if you are too upset or when you are in that emotionally charged space. Okay? Or if you've forgotten, right, which is totally okay, if you are already in the throes of that reaction, catch yourself, okay? Catch yourself and then don't talk, right? It's not a problem if you've gotten there, but let the emotion be a signal. Be a signal to cool off, which I'm going to tell you more about in a moment, and bring up the issue if you feel like you still need to later when you are both calm, right? As a side tip that I would add to your ground rules in general is, and really to help you avoid all of this that I've been talking about from happening, or actually to be able to address an issue when you're calm, I highly, highly suggest that you bring things up to talk about, up for discussion in a designated weekly talk. I've always liked to call these heart talks because they're a time to be open and lovingly hold space for each other. Or, some people like to call it a communication session or a weekly check-in. And I really can't emphasize enough how powerful it is to put this on your calendar for one night a week, forever and ongoingly. This is not the episode where I'm going to talk in more detail about that. Maybe I will someday. But that's so key. It can help you avoid this stuff from happening left and right or ever really in your daily life together. Okay? All right. But now I want to talk about some essential steps to deal with that emotional reactivity in the moment when your emotions are activated. Okay, so the first work is simply to notice that you're experiencing these strong emotions, right? Usually we can feel that in our bodies as like a welling up of strong emotions, right? And once we feel that, it is a time to what I call pivot. It is time to bring your attention to yourself and then kind of look at what's going on for you. Because you're not going to solve it by talking to him or engaging with him further from this place. Okay. So the trick is to pivot to yourself and notice what's going on. And I want to provide you right now with a specific tool that you can use to do this really effectively. That's just going to help so much. So I call it REST, R-E-S-T. And what that stands for is rate, emotion, sensation, thoughts. Okay? The first thing, the R, is to rate. And as soon as you notice the emotion, the idea here is to pivot, meaning turn your attention to yourself, and rate how strong that emotion is on a scale. The scale is going to be -10 to +10, with 0 being neutral right in the middle. Now, if we're feeling emotionally charged, usually that's always going to be in the negative realm. So it might be terrible, awful, the most emotion you've ever experienced. That would be a -10. 0 would be neutral. So if you turn your attention to what you're feeling, that strong surge of energy, you will rate that most likely somewhere between like 8, -9 to -3 or something. Okay. But if your rating is below a -4 or a -5, this is really important. It's definitely time to take a time out. Okay. And that just means heading to the other room or walking away from your partner to your own space where you can be alone for a little bit. All right. Now, I know this can be so hard because we're naturally compelled to figure it out now, right? To make it all go away now, like we just talked about. But if you can go aware, if you can become aware, if you can simply notice your state of being just enough to rate it on that scale, you'll have just that much more self-control. You'll have enough self-control, agency to effectively manage yourself in the situation and remove yourself from it. So, when you've rated below a -4 on the scale, simply excuse yourself, right? And it can be a nice thing to say, I need to get myself back to a calm place so that we can address this better later, or maybe we won't even need to, right? It can be nice to say something like that to your partner, or you can have made this agreement before. Hey, if I ever get really emotionally reactive, I have decided I'm going to, from now on, remove myself so I can handle myself better and come back to you in a better place because I love you and I want things to be good, right? That kind of thing. All right. Now, next step, when you are actually in the other room, when you are actually alone, I highly suggest finishing the rest process, the REST process. Okay. And if you didn't rate below a -3, if you rated like a -3 or above, you can stay in the room with him and finish the rest process there. Okay. You know you best. So see what works for you. You can kind of explore. All right. But this is how you finish the rest process. Right. So you've rated the feeling, and now you're going to, it's E. E is for emotion. And what I mean by that is name the emotion, identify it. What is this feeling? Okay. It would be frustration, anger, grief, sadness, hurt, shame, embarrassment, fear, right? Those are emotions, not something like, I feel like you never listened to me. That's a thought. That is not an emotion, right? So name the actual emotion. Like if you felt like he never listened to you, you would maybe feel unvalued or unheard or dismissed, right? Or hurt. You see that? Those are more like real emotions. So name the emotion, then move on to S. Sense it in your body. Sense that emotion in your body. What does it feel like inside of your body as sensation? What are the sensations there of that emotion? Okay. And then the next piece is to notice, actually, it's a T, right? T means thoughts. So notice the thoughts going through your mind. Just witness your own mind. What are the thoughts that are there? All right. So sometimes we might need to hold off on witnessing those thoughts. Sometimes it can be good to just like, oh, what are those thoughts? Interesting. That's what's going on for me. Right. And you can see a lot of this requires sort of stepping into this place where you're able to really witness yourself. And that's actually a huge part of why this is so powerful, because stepping into that space of witnessing what's going on for you removes you from being in the thick of it, right? It allows you to step back a little bit. So important. All right. So once you've done that initial rest process, it can be, maybe that's enough, right? Maybe that really has helped you calm down. But most often, those emotions are going to still be kind of strong, which means it's time to let yourself decompress, right? Don't go rushing back to the scene, right? Stay in that timeout, right? So you've got to allow for the feelings you're having, to not rush yourself out of them, okay? It's time, once you've gone through rest, to allow yourself to have those feelings and soothe that ancient animal body, that ancient nervous system, that ancient brain, that fear body of it, I call it the fear body sometimes, like that in you that's like so activated in the moment, right? And really, this is that primal part I talk about, that primal brain, that primal nervous system that we all have. It's really like the animal in us, right? And it's really just doing its job when it's activated like this to keep you surviving, but it's not concerned with thriving in relationships, right? So that's why it freaks out, goes into fight or flight to protect you as it's meant to when it perceives threat, right? So when it activates, nothing's gone wrong, but you are definitely going to want to soothe it, to soothe this part of your body mind, right? Like you would a baby who's really upset. It needs your soothing attention. And there's lots of things that can help with that. And what works best to soothe your own animal body, it will be specific for you. And I'm not actually going to go into all of those. I've actually talked about it on the episode about the HSP mind, body, heart slump. We went into some of the ways to do that there. And when I work with clients, we always, if this is a feature of their, the hard time that they have in their marriage, we always find ways that work really well for them to soothe them through this and learn really specific processes that help them feel so much calmer, so much more ready to go back to their partner once they're calm and centered again. And then they can address things from there so much more effectively. So my invitation to you is to try these out, not just once, but many times. It can take some getting used to, right, to create a new habit. So be patient with yourself and keep at it, because it's going to be so worth it, so powerful in changing so many things in your relationship when you can get this down. Super quick review. Commit to not talking when you're in this charged emotional space. If you forget and you slip up and you start reacting, simply use that as a signal to pivot to yourself and begin the REST practice by rating how strong your emotion is. If it's below a -4, take a time out. Right? And then finish the EST part of the practice on your own and take the time that you need to calm down. Do whatever you need to get into that much more calm place where your emotions have cleared and you're much more centered before you reemerge and try to talk about anything with your partner. Or you might find that you don't need to. Now, I want to briefly mention where some of this emotional reactivity comes from. I think I kind of addressed a little bit of it in the beginning, but so much of our emotional reactivity actually has to do with our partner or other people violating our unconscious rules that we have for them. We walk around with rules and expectations about what we think other people should do, about how other people should behave, about how our partner should be in a relationship with us, what they should do for us, all of this, right? And we also believe subconsciously that what other people do, what your partner does, is where your feelings come from, right? So if they don't agree with us, if they don't parent the way we think they should, or the way we think it should be done, or if they don't keep things tidy in the way we want, or, if your partner doesn't spend time with you in the evenings as much as you want him to or think he should, these are things that we can get upset about and we can react from that upset about, right? So when we have these unexamined rules, these unexamined expectations, we tend to try to impose them on others. And when they don't abide, we will bring onto ourselves a lot of unnecessary, painful emotions, strong emotions, right? It can cause a lot of emotional upheaval in ourselves when we have this going on, which most of us do, right? And we then take ourselves far from the love and the understanding and support and connection that we actually want to experience in our marriages, right? So the amazing news is that their actions don't actually determine our feelings. The way we internalize their actions are what create our feelings. And we can change that. So that actually entails taking a good look at our rules, our subconscious rules and expectations and thoughts and beliefs and perceptions and the ways we interpret things, right? And questioning all of those and releasing the ones that aren't working for us, that aren't serving us, right? We need to be able to see and question our own thinking, our own interpretation. But we only do that once we're calmer, right? We don't do it in the heat of the moment when we're really upset. It just won't work. It won't work. So using the rest process and what I've laid out will really get you to the place where you can do that more easily. So you might not even need to go have a conversation with him, but you might just turn and have this conversation with your own self, with your own mind. What am I believing? What am I making this mean? So I'm not going to go into that now. But you can learn to work on your own thoughts and question them and find out if they're serving you or not. I did lay out a little bit of how to do that in episode 13 and episode 16. They're great starting places for this. Now, I want to add one final thing here, which is something I already mentioned earlier, but so important to highlight. When we don't know how to safely feel our feelings, how to safely allow and process our feelings ourselves, we react out of them. Right? When we only know how to do that, to react out of our feelings, we will end up acting them out, right? In most likely pretty negative ways that don't work, and really spewing them all over our partner and all over our marriage. And it will not lead to great things. So important to learn how to safely actually feel your feelings instead of reacting out of them, so that they can move through you in a healthy way, and so that you can be free to address any issue that you might have that might come up between you and your partner way more peacefully, way more effectively, and end up feeling closer in the end and having more understanding and more sweet, deep intimacy with your man and yourself. So we will dive in a little bit next week about how to safely feel your feelings. So join me then. And if you are like, wow, yeah, I want to be able to do all of this, want to prevent all of this emotional reactivity and be really awesome at coming back to that calm place and working through things with your partner really effectively, if you want to be able to do all of that yourself, always and forever, and bring it into every relationship in your life, not just your marriage, and you see how important that's going to be in, making your relationships and making your marriage so much better, so much more loving and light and fun and enjoyable, then I invite you to come coach with me. It starts with applying for and setting up your free consult call to see exactly where your work is and if coaching with me is a fit for you. To do so, go to the show notes and click the link to schedule your consult, or email me at hannah@lifeisworthloving.com. In the meantime, enjoy using the rest process and be oh so well.